From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is celebrating National Dignity Day alongside high-ranking military officials and personnel of the armed forces. The event to mark the day is taking place in the state of Aragua. These are live images. On February 4, 1992, Hugo Chavez began a civic-military rebellion that laid the foundations for the Bolivarian Revolution. President Maduro said they must remember the path that began on that day with Chavez at the forefront.
Here the path begins, here the path continues, and always with Chavez at the head, always with the dignity of the people. Today, more than ever, vindicated in the fight we are in for national sovereignty, the absolute independence of our country, and for respect for the values of our Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
In a recent interview, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro insisted that dialogue was the way to solve the political situation in the country.
Open to dialogue, understanding, and respect of Venezuela's independence. We are open to 1,000 formulas for that kind of understanding. We don't accept ultimatums from anyone. It's like if I told the European Union, I give you 7 days to recognize the Republic of Catalonia, and if you don't, we're going to take measures. No, international politics can't be based on ultimatums. That was the era of empires and colonies.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez confirmed what he had announced before, that his government recognizes Venezuela's self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaidó. Previously, Sánchez, on behalf of the European Union, had given the elected government of Nicolas Maduro a deadline of 8 days to call for a new election. Hours later, the EU decided it would not speak as a body, but that each state would be free to make its own declaration. And many Venezuelan worshippers are praying to late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to maintain the revolution he started 20 years ago. They say he brought dignity to the Venezuelan people and took millions out of poverty and misery, and that President Maduro is aiming to continue with his work.
Everything that we have right here in the house, apartment, food, it was all thanks to our commander Chavez. So then, we Santeros and Paleros, we know that this revolution will never fall.
In other news, the Canadian government has denied Telesur Press access to cover the so-called Lima Group meeting on Monday in Ottawa that will discuss the situation in Venezuela. In response, Telesur's president, Patricia Villegas, tweeted, "Those who speak of freedom demonstrate through every action how much they don't understand its meaning." She says Telesur will not give up its mission to inform. The summit is in support of the Venezuelan opposition. For more on what's happening in Venezuela, we are joined by phone by former Mayor of London, Kenneth Livingstone. Good morning, Kenneth. Thank you for joining us. Kenneth, can you hear us? Okay, so we'll try to make a connection with Kenneth soon, and then we'll go to other stories as soon as we can contact him. Let's go to El Salvador. El Salvador had elections. Nayib Bukele won the presidency in the first round. According to preliminary results, Bukele, from the Great Alliance for National Unity, Ghana, received 53.8% of the votes. Since the end of the civil war in 1992, El Salvador has been governed by the right-wing Arena Party and the left-wing FMLN.
At this time, we can announce with full certainty that we've won the presidency of the Republic. Today, we won the first round and we made history. We received more votes than Arena and the FMLN put together.
And the candidate for the FMLN, Hugo Martinez, has accepted the election results and ensured that his party will continue to fight for policies of inclusion under the new government.
We are prepared to continue fighting for those very commitments that we made with thousands and thousands of Salvadorians who we respect and for whom we will continue fighting for. We are also committed to defend our social achievements. We are committed to defending the price of the milk, school supplies, agriculture package, pensions, the increase to the minimum salary, because we are convinced that it's a matter of justice.
And since Bukele received over 50% of the votes, there won't be a second round of the election. Carlos Calleja from the far-right Arena Party came in second with nearly 32% of the vote. Hugo Martinez from the ruling FMLN was just under 14%, and Josué Alvarado from Vamos had less than 1%. The Supreme Electoral Court in El Salvador may file a sanction against Bukele. This is because Bukele held a press conference in which he called for citizens to vote during the election day. All presidential candidates are banned from campaigning after the electoral campaign closes. Bukele could face an administrative sanction for this. Our special correspondent in El Salvador, Jorge Gestoso, explained what role migration played during the campaign.
Migrants hasn't been very curiously has not been in the discussion, if you want, in the arguments, not even the issue of violence that are two key issues in this country. Definitely what the people of the FMLN, the political party in power, is saying is migrants during their last 10 years, the two last terms, was not motivated by poverty as they're trying to paint with those caravans, and most of them are from Guatemalans and not Salvadorians, and the people who are fleeing this country are not fleeing because of poverty, if not they're eventually because of violence and insecurity.
And we have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
From here to beyond the South, from here to the Caribbean or further north, where can I see news connecting the whole South? From Washington, from Mexico, from Caracas, from Quito, from Havana. You can always see the news from a new vision, connecting the global South. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. At least 28 Haitians have died at sea in Bahamas after their boat sank, and another group of 17 Haitian migrants were rescued on Sunday. Since the beginning of this year, almost 300 Haitian migrants have been intercepted at sea in 4 rescue operations by Bahamas authorities. All of them were repatriated to their home country. The missing plane carrying Argentinian footballer Emiliano Sala has been found. Britain's Air Accidents Investigation Branch is expected to issue a statement on Monday with more information. Sala's aircraft went missing close to the Channel Island on January 21. He was traveling from France to join up with his new club, the Premier League's Cardiff City. And we'll share a unique story, that of the Cuban Jorge Luis Betancourt Sanchez, who has been working for years on his passion, restoring antiques.
People, the restoration of antiques is the art of patience. It's a specialized job that requires a great deal of skill and observation.
First of all, you need to be a natural. Ever since I was a child, I had an interest in art. My first job was working on religious imagery, and from there, I went on to work with metals. I managed to link up with the History Museum when I was young, which is where I learned my technical skills. And as a teenager, I traveled to Havana and met restorers who taught me world-class restoration.
For Jorge, investigation and knowledge are everything.
Success in restoration relies upon using the materials from the time of the piece. In general, all these pieces came to me completely damaged, so I had to check sources of the time period and know about the old way of doing things. I have restored gramophones, music boxes, pianos, weapons and cannons, so they can all be exhibited.
He not only worked on pieces to restore their beauty, but ensure they work too.
First of all, I had a great teacher called Dr. Eusebio Leal, and I remember something he said to me at Havana University. He said, "We have to save Cuban things," and those words inspired me, and that's why I dedicated my life to this.
The Art Museum of Guibarra City displays the work of Jorge Luis and his team. Every exhibition is the result of working tirelessly.
For me, the best part of the job is the joy I get from making the pieces work, and each one is special to me.
Eddie de la Pera y Jordanis Rodríguez Laurencio, Telesur, Holguín, Cuba.
So this weekend in Paraguay, protesters marked the 30th anniversary of the end of Alfredo Stroessner's dictatorship. Social movements rallied in the capital Asunción to protest the legacy of the dictatorship. President Mario Abdo Benítez, whose father was Stroessner's personal secretary, has made no reference to the anniversary.
There is persecution. Persecution continues as in the time of Stroessner, although it's not so much, but there is always repression and brutal exploitation of workers.
Now to Peru. Left-wing forces are seeking to form an electoral bloc ahead of the presidential elections in 2021. Let's learn more about who they are and what their goals are.
The city of Huancayo hosted the Voices of Change Forum, where the progressive Peruvian movements met. Among them, the New Peru leftist movement, led by Veronica Mendoza, who almost made it to the second round in the 2016 presidential elections.
The 2021 elections are going to coincide with the bicentennial anniversary of the failed Declaration of Independence. Therefore, we must complete this process, comrades, and build a true independence for all people in Peru.
Some growing local movements from regions such as Cajamarca, Junín, Puno, and Moquegua also participated in the event, and they promised to leave their personal interests behind and prioritize Peru as a whole nation.
That's why when a fellow compatriot wants to work, to fight, to organize, and to persuade the people, we need to support him. We have to encourage him.
Non-partisan movements also welcomed the initiative and asked to be involved.
The way political parties are formed and how people become politically active have changed and transformed. People act based on certain agendas.
This is the case with youth movements, feminist groups, LGBTI communities, and environmental groups, along with other movements with progressive views and goals.
It is important to remember that if we expand our target and propose to introduce a political and electoral alternative over the next few years, then we need to articulate this clearly to the sectors we intend to mobilize.
There are still 2 years left until the next presidential election, but as the first step, attendees at the Voices of Change Forum proposed the end of the current political constitution approved under former President Alberto Fujimori, as its economic section only benefits the business sector.
And we continue with some live images as Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is celebrating National Dignity Day. This event marks the day, February 4th, where Hugo Chavez began the Bolivarian Revolution.
Despertar de nuestra patria, que seré leal.
So for more on this and to analyze what's going on in Venezuela, we are now joined by the former mayor of London, Kenneth Livingstone. Hello, Kenneth. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
So what are your thoughts on the pressures towards Venezuela, and why are there so many attempts by the U.S. and allies to change the government?
Well, the simple fact is, all my lifetime, I was born at the end of the Second World War, and right the way through my lifetime, I've watched America overthrowing democratically elected governments all over Central and South America. As soon as those governments start to make sure that they're not being ripped off by American corporations, and Chavez took control of Venezuela's oil from the American corporation, used that to improve housing and health and education for the people of Venezuela. Those are the sort of governments that America wants out. Although America always talks about it's intervening to support democracy, they invariably are overthrowing democracy and just bringing in dictatorships that will do what America's corporate interests want.
So it seems that a lot of media are still saying that it's not about oil, that it's about democracy. Is that still true?
It's completely untrue. Don't get most of the Western media are broadly aligned with America's imperial interests. You get virtually no honest coverage of many of these areas. I remember all the stuff we were told about Castro and Cuba and so on. And if you look, perhaps the greatest crime that everyone remembers is the overthrow in 1973 of the democratically elected Chilean government, which then led to decades of dictatorship and thousands of lives lost. Why? Because here you had a president who was suddenly doing things for the people of Chile rather than just American corporate interests. Literally, I think of perhaps the worst war of my lifetime, which was the war in Vietnam. The people of Vietnam wanted their own freedom from the French, but America propped that up. And then when France withdrew, it propped up a ghastly reactionary regime in the south. So the people of Vietnam went through 30 years of war with the loss of millions of lives because America feared that Ho Chi Minh, who was the communist leader who fought against the Japanese during the Second World War, wasn't going to be with their puppet.
Let's look at the UK's role. The government has recognized a self-proclaimed interim president like Juan Guaido, and you've been very spoken out against it. Why have so few in Parliament rejected it?
Well, the simple fact is that, right the way across the West, governments have come in behind America and endorsed this. Can't really call it a coup, just someone standing up and saying, well, I'm now the president. It all looks a bit ridiculous. The simple fact is there's a very real risk of a civil war in Venezuela if there's an attempt to overthrow the democratically elected president. And he was elected last year, and most of his opponents weren't prepared to stand because they knew they weren't going to win. It's just ridiculous that America is fiddling around like this.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Kenneth, for your time.
Thank you.
We've been talking to Kenneth Livingstone, former mayor of London, on the situation of Venezuela. And we're taking one last break, but stay with us.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Friday. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes in northern Australia due to floods caused by heavy rains. Military and emergency workers are using boats and helicopters to rescue people who are still stranded. Meanwhile, experts are warning of more rain in the coming days. A record 1.2 meters of rain has fallen across the area over the past 7 days. Pope Francis has arrived in the United Arab Emirates for a historic visit. This is the first time a pope has visited the Arabian Peninsula. He was received by the Crown Prince and the Grand Imam of Sunni people. On his 3-day trip, the Pope will meet leading Muslim clerics and hold an open-air mass for almost 150,000 Catholics. In Gaza, orphan children have rallied to demand the end of the 12-year blockade to the Strip. They released balloons with banners and messages dedicated to their parents, many of them who were killed by Israeli forces. They are urging the international community to support a solution to the conflict so they can have a proper life.
Today, after 12 years of the unjust siege on the Gaza Strip, the charity institutions have become unable to provide aid to this important group of children. An orphan child cannot afford his expenses, and he cannot find anybody to help him complete his studies. This is our message to the ones who besiege us. The Zionist occupation is completely responsible for the siege of the Gaza Strip.
At least 7 people have been killed and 24 have been injured after several train coaches derailed in the northern Indian state of Bihar. The Simanchal Express train was on its way to Delhi at full speed when 11 carriages derailed and went off the tracks at around 4 in the morning local time. Rescue workers are still in the area and the cause of the accident is yet to be known. The presidential campaign has kicked off in Senegal. President Macky Sall hopes to be re-elected in the first round, but he will have to face 4 other candidates. Sall says infrastructure development is his greater achievement. The presidential election is scheduled for February 24.
Before Issa was candidate, he did something for Senegal. He built the Sahel University, so he invested in Senegal. That's why Issa is the best candidate. He's a candidate of values.
We want to change the country with our leader Ousmane Sonko. We have faith in him. We believe in him. That's why this campaign is our campaign. It's the campaign of the youth, and all the youth is ready to oust this government from Senegal.
And health officials in Nigeria are stepping up their efforts to contain a Lassa fever outbreak. The viral disease causes bleeding and it has claimed the lives of 42 people since January. Lassa fever has become an annual occurrence in the country, but the country's health ministry says it's making significant progress in containing the disease by focusing on awareness programs.
We've galvanized efforts in responding to any outbreak of Lassa fever. We have a very strong team here of specialists in infectious disease who have managed Lassa over the years.
South Africa's left-wing party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, have unveiled its program for the upcoming legislative elections. Land redistribution and job creation are at the top of the list.
We cannot postpone the land question. We cannot postpone the jobs question. It must happen now. We don't want to be told that we'll get land in 2030. We don't want to be told that we'll get jobs in 2030. We want jobs now. We are hungry now. We want to eat now.
The United States is sending an additional 3,750 troops to the Mexican border. That will bring the total number of soldiers at the border to about 4,300. The Department of Defense says the new troops will be stationed there for 3 months while they build razor wire fences and support border agents with surveillance work. Critics have called this a political stunt. It comes as President Donald Trump continues to fight Congress for funding to build a border wall. Mexican director Alfonso Cuarón has won the Best Director's Award for the movie Roma at the Directors Guild Awards ceremony ahead of the Oscars. Cuarón's latest win makes him a serious contender to win an Oscar in 3 weeks' time. Roma has 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Picture. The film is a black and white semi-autobiography about an indigenous domestic worker in Mexico in the 1970s.
If there are miracles I appreciate in life, it's moments like this, in which I get to have, to receive this award from Guillermo. Guillermo, gracias, cabrón. You are, cabrón, you are my film career, you know that. Well, thank you so much, TGA. And finally, I want to acknowledge Libo, my mother, my family in Mexico, and my country, the real architects of Roma.
A big achievement for Latin America. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.